I was planning to use this video as a report on my trip to China, but on my way back from Beijing to Amsterdam, I realized that in the course of the 2 weeks that I was in China, I had to revise my ideas about Taijiquan. And this is for the simple reason that when visiting Taijiquan, talking with different Daoists and talking with different people outside of the monastery also, I came to understand that most of the people who practice Taijiquan see it as a martial art in the sense of a fighting skill, but martial art actually is a art, and therefore today we are going to talk about what is art and how does it relate to Taijiquan, and why is it that maybe you are just trying to do some exercises and therefore you are not doing Taijiquan at all. So let's get back to that, and let's talk a bit about Zhangsanfeng also. Zhangsanfeng is a key player in our understanding of Taijiquan, and I know many people in the West, they still think that Zhangsanfeng is just a myth, that he is just a made-up figure because of some of the suggestions made by Western scientists and some of the Chinese communist historians. But the reality is that there are books from his name, from his time, and bearing the name of Zhangsanfeng. So, not saying anything about the truth of Zhangsanfeng as a person, let's talk a little bit about Zhangsanfeng and his ideas from the mythological perspective. And here we are going to talk more about art and culture, and therefore what Taijiquan actually means and what it entails and what it wants to do. And in this sense, Taijiquan is much more fun than you actually think. So let's discuss this and put some things on the line. Worldwide, about 30 million people are guessed to practice Taijiquan in the world. That's quite a lot. That is outside of China. Within China, it is estimated that there are about 50, maybe 52 million people practice Taijiquan. It is much less, since China government is not necessarily stimulating the development of Taijiquan anymore. In that amount of people, you can say that Chen and Yang style, they are the mostly professed. The Wudang style, like what I teach, is at most about 4–4.5%, although the amount is growing because more and more people, they go there for a week, they learn a form and they start teaching. The same process that went on with the Chen and the Yang style in the beginning, through which there is a large amount of expense, but not necessarily very high quality. There are a few things nowadays that you need to know about Taijiquan though, that are not commonly known, and that is that within all these different kind of styles of Taijiquan, there are also 3 different kind of approaches, you can say flavors of Taijiquan, that are nowadays relevant to understand which Taijiquan is best suitable for you. We're going to talk today about one particular form, one particular flavor, and the other 2 I'm going to mention, and then I'm going to leave them alone. The first one is what we call the PRC nationalist style. So these are the kind of military styles that has people in a beautiful uniform and they give mass demonstrations, or they have classes where everybody is literally organized in rows where everybody makes the same moves. You see them also in the West. They copy this, which is also sometimes as a joke called pyjama Taijiquan. When you look at the other flavor, you can say this is the health flavor. The health flavor is the one that is related to Yangsen, as people talk about it, and these are seeing the exercises as part of sports and as part of health promotion. And the military flavor, although it is also very often citing the health benefits, primarily it's a disciplining art to make sure that everybody moves in exactly the same way and that they learn to listen to commands in the way how they follow the classes. So this is why it is called military style. The health flavor is a little bit more loose in that sense, but emphasis is done on all kind of research to prove why particular kind of Taijiquan or particular kind of exercises are actually healthy. And I count Qigong in that sense, in that category. Yangsen usually is in that. The third category is where we are going to talk about namely the Taijiquan as an art. Of course, martial arts, Taijiquan is a martial arts, and many people they emphasize the martial part, the military part, while in fact it is using military practices to create art, and this is what it's all about. So you have to realize for yourself which kind are you belonging to. Anybody following Zhangsanfeng is doing it because of the art aspect. The Yangtze aspect is very popular because it attracts foreigners and because it attracts people who want to do this for their health or because they're aging. And it's not wrong, and military style also is not necessarily wrong, but you have to understand the flavors to understand which one is suitable for you. The one that is art includes discipline, includes health, and so on and so on, but also a few other aspects. And we're going to go a little bit into the aspect of art today. In Chinese culture, there are two stories I want to talk to you about. The one is the story of Bai Shi, the white snake. There's an opera about it, and it's a very beautiful opera, and there has been movies about the story also. And it's about a white snake goddess who, after 1,000 years of cultivation, she decides that it is time to go back to Earth because she is in love with a man, and she starts a relationship with this man, and the man doesn't know she's a snake goddess. And as a result of that, when he finds out, there's going to be all kind of intrigues, and in this process love is being tested. And one of the stories is that love is better than immortality, because immortality doesn't give you happiness. And that's true. If you read the immortality stories and you read the theoretical frameworks like from Zhangsanfeng, Wudang, from Tao Hongjing, from and from many other people, you've seen all these stories that the emotional aspect of life, where people are dedicated to the experience of life, is sometimes detrimental to your spiritual cultivation. This story then reverses this, and she says, like, the cultivation is great, I now live 1,000 years, but the experience of love, somebody who really loves you, having a family and so on, is much better. And then of course she gets punished by the Buddha because she is trespassing on the principles of cultivation, because the Buddha, in its rationality, that's also what you see in the art, it's all very mathematical, cannot accept that you would let go of your cultivation, so you have to be punished. And she gets a punishment for 1,000 years, and the man through different rebirths always comes back to the place where he can wait for her until 1,000 years of being passed. This myth makes me think about another story that somebody else told me one time. This story is about the time from before the Zhou dynasty. The Zhou dynasty invaded China from the Western realm, and in this Western realm the Zhou dynasty people invaded on horseback. They're not necessarily coming from Tibet, but they're coming from the West Sichuan area probably, because in this time China was no longer than the Yellow and the Yangtze River basin, no larger than that. And the Shang dynasty, more tribal cultures, you can say, they were divided in subgroups, and usually a valley would be like a nation, you can say, and there was a cultural unity because of exchanges and so on. But the story what this person told me was that of a protector deity who was originally a human being. This human being was a selected person to become the shaman of the village, or whatever they want to call it. He had to meditate, and he had to meditate deeper and deeper and deeper until eventually he could sit on the top of the mountain of the valley, the guardian mountain of the valley, and he would become an immortal being at that point. And as an immortal being, he had to protect that valley, and because of his meditative protection, he managed to avoid that the Zhou dynasty horsemen would invade this valley. So this valley was being secluded and was much longer free from the Zhou dynasty than many other places in China. The story, the subplot in the story though, is that originally this boy, and when he was selected, he was a neighbor or friends with a girl, and they were deeply in love already from childhood. The girl, of course, grieved a lot about the fact that he was selected for this function, and in that time, as a child from a parent, there was no way how you could choose your own path. The luxury that we have nowadays in selecting our own path all over the world, or many parts of the world anyway, is something that is acquired over time, but it is not necessarily inherent to all cultures in the past. So even though they loved each other very much, she would have to accept that he did that. But what she did, certainly in the period when he was getting into this immortality state, she would come to support him, to take care of him, to protect him, and she stayed there until he was just a heap of grass and plants, because he was completely assimilated with the mountain, you can say, and only his spirit was still there and became a god. And she herself kept watering, taking care of the place as long as she lived. So at a very old age she died at the same place with him, and she promised that every 1,000 years she would come back, her spirit, to meet with him and to spend time with him, and then the rest he could spend on this security for the valley. How long that story lasts, of course, we don't know. It is something that is outside of the reach of our understanding, because these stories usually only are being transmitted from generation to generation, or maybe even invented or thought of. We don't know. But that is not important. It is the theme that is in there which is interfering with the theme of immortality. Namely, there is something like love and there is something like obligation. The thing is that for immortalists, the idea of becoming immortal and a protector of nature and the world, that is sort of an obligation. As soon as you are awoken, enlightened to the help that the world needs to protect itself against, for instance, humans, which we clearly can see in our time, that is definitely a necessity, then at that moment we can say, oh, okay, good, this is something that we have to work on, and we need enlightened beings to create inspiration on that work. In our current state, these enlightened beings are mostly politicians and economic leaders that have to try to protect the earth, because the spiritual beings, they don't have enough time, not enough power also. But this is where art comes around. So let's go talk a little bit about that, and I am going to use the biography of a movie maker from Russia as a lead on this. I was a huge fan from this man, and I'm going to talk to you about his ideas, and I will relate them to Taijiquan and the art aspect, because the aspect of art in Chinese culture has been seen always as very important, but they're seen as so much individualistic and idealistic that they hardly have any real clear definition. Zhangsanfeng talks about this, and I will show in the background what he said about this. But let's get on with this idea of this movie maker. This movie maker was Andrei Tarkovsky. He was a Russian movie maker, famous for movies like Sacrifice, Stalker, the Travel to Space, and he was ousted by the Soviets because he made a movie about a famous Russian composer who was ousted from the Communist Party, and he had to go into banishing. He became banished, basically. He couldn't go back to Russia for the risk of punishment for making this movie where he won a prize for at Cannes. I will go with you through 12 points and reflect on these with Taijiquan and show his vision on art. Andrei Tarkovsky's father was a poet, and as a poet he taught his son a lot of things. And Tarkovsky, as a result of this, he says that an artist who makes art is constantly inspired by his childhood. He thought that all art in fact is poetry. In his idea, making a movie, writing a poem, or doing something else similar is in fact all just poetry. He also made a claim as an extension of that: when you make art, you are inspired by your childhood. Childhood continuously provides new ideas about what to do and to work with. Personally, I think that children don't really forget anything in their life, so when they grow up, they keep asking the same questions that they have already when they were like 1 or 2, and they just continuously reformulate that, and that is actually what we then call the inspiration from childhood, as Tarkovsky sees it. In Confucianism, Daoism, they see that children are born as demons and they have to be educated, but they also get this drive from the inside, so that they feel something from the inside reaching to that. When they become more mature and they develop an artistic impulse, then at that moment you can say that they are overcoming their demonic side. The thing is that at the moment when you are born, in fact, you are not really very emotional yet. That is basically what Daoism claims. This demonic side is actually driven by needs, but it is not necessarily emotional. So because it's not necessarily emotional, it is more or less also what is the ideal when you become a spiritual being, is that you are not as emotional as many people are in our culture. Of course, we are promoting emotionality over rationality, and this is also why so many people are opinionated and getting into trouble with the law or with their family. About art, he claims that all can be reduced to poetry, as I said, and as such, art is a poetic thing. So every time when you feel like I want to be an artist, you have to ask yourself, am I a poetic nature? At the moment when you are doing Taijiquan, similar like that, is my art a poetic expression? That means, is there something like beauty in there? Is there morality in there? Is there story in there? Is there mysticism in there? Is there depth in there? All kind of things that we usually associate with poetry. He also claims that poetry is rooted in a belief system, so to say. And this is something that is really very agreeable to Taoism, because they say that the religiosity is actually the teaching of the ancestors. And the ancestors, they bring people into a particular kind of mystical sphere through which they can make a connection with the divine. And Taijiquan is a tool to do these kind of things. The purpose of Taijiquan is to reach the divine, and this is a poetic experience. Tarkovsky goes as far as to say that religion is the source of all culture. So that means that if you are religious, you are actually cultivating yourself. In Chinese culture, this is a little bit similar. Taoism talks about being a Zhenrun, and when you're a Zhenrun, it's a true human. That means that you're also civilized. Somebody who has no civility, no morality, and so on, can never be a Zhenrun. So it means that not your emotions are creating your civility, but it is your behavior in general which creates that, and it has to be filled with morality and poetic experience. In effect, Tarkovsky says that art comes from spiritual needs. So if you have no spiritual needs, then you also have no poetic needs. And you have no poetic expression. A lot of people, they don't have this poetic expression. And as a result of that, you can consider them as not relevant to the experience of poetry. For Daoism, and Wudang Daoism specifically, of course, but Daoism in general, they are focusing very much on belief. That is the belief in immortality, and the belief in immortals. And we call this a Tao, what usually in West is translated as Taoism. But it's not Taoism, it is the Daoist teachings that you have belief and faith in. So that belief is actually what makes us connect with the divine, and that is what is important for Taijiquan, but also for Tarkovsky. Art on sich, by the way, Tarkovsky sees as being descriptive, and because it's being descriptive, it is in fact similar like science, but it doesn't determine little details and facts, but it actually creates worldview. So when you're making a painting, you're writing a poem, or you are practicing your Taijiquan, you're creating a worldview. So you are going through the worldview of Taoism at the moment when you do Wudang Daoist Taijiquan. Of course, that means that you have to understand more about the theoretical background. You have to understand about medicine. You have to understand about the divine realms, the gods, and so on, and how they affect you. You have to know about the stars and the ancestors. A lot of things that you gradually get to step by step through your progress over time. And that is what you don't see in modern Taijiquan. You don't see these kind of things. And as a result of that, you can say that modern Taijiquan, even though people feel like they're doing something spiritual, actually they're doing something materialistic. One thing that I thought was very interesting is that Tarkovsky sees art as making of images. And images, he says, are undividable. That means if you have an image, it is always because of its surrounding, because of its context, basically it becomes an image. And as such, it is undividable. But it also means that the image is elusive. Like when you're looking at me, you are not exactly knowing why I am here. Maybe I'm just taking care of my plants and my garden. Maybe I have a symbolic meaning. And this is actually what Tarkovsky points out, is that art, per definition, is symbolic. And this symbolicism is also what creates the pathway towards divine and mysticism. Right now, yeah, there it is. Many people, they know about the symbol of Tai Chi, the yin yang two, and Zhangsanfeng calls the yin and the yang from Tai Chi, he calls the two rituals. The Tai Chi, he says, is a description of Tao. So the Tao is a description of the yin and the yang ritual as such. And in that process, everybody over time has made clear that when there is Tao, there is also Qi. And at the moment when there's Tao and there is Qi at the same time, then at that moment we talk all the time about all kinds of symbols. And these symbols, they create an image. Of course, the I Ching and also many things of Confucius and many other writers in Chinese cultures, they talk about this kind of imagery, and as such they also clearly use symbols as a communication means. And as such, the Daoist classics, when you read them, they're actually descriptive and they use poetic language, because that poetic language actually has to create that particular kind of association of a whole image, which is both elusive and also undividable. So at the moment when you go through Daoist prayer, for instance, or you go to a Daoist form, a Taijiquan form, then in all cases the form is not dividable, so you cannot cut up the form that easily. The form is always a whole. At the moment when you're learning, you actually learn a divided set of moves that gradually have to be integrated, and then eventually the whole of the Taijiquan is a ritual. And at the moment when you realize that the Taijiquan is a ritual, a Daoist ritual to help you connect with Tao and Tai Chi as such, then at that moment you start understanding it. At the moment when you just see it as a mechanical process of movement, then at that moment it's actually not Tai Chi, it's actually just sports. The authenticity of an image, Tarkovsky also saw as a very important part, because it makes that every image is also something like a puzzle, and this puzzle is something that you have to figure out. So that means that it is impossible to explain a movement completely, because you have to figure it out. And at the moment when you learn Taijiquan, as a teacher, there's a lot of things that you do not say, and that you gradually introduce bit by bit through the symbols of your language, because the symbols of your moves and so on and so on. So as a result of that, people gradually learn about these kind of things. The daily practice, in that sense of your Taijiquan, that's a ritual, and that ritual is based on faith, because you do not know before you get there what is actually the mystical experience or the elusive experience of the poetic nature of Tao. That is something that gradually has to be discovered and developed and cultivated. That's why it's called self-cultivation, because it's not just the cultivation of the self, but it is the self in relationship to the world as a whole, to the Tao, and therefore also to nature. Yeah, this is really garbage. This is from the neighbors. I really have to get rid of these things. Then there's another thing, and that namely is that the poetic image is not a fantasy. So many people associate with being poetic with having a big fantasy or creating imagery, paintings or something that you have a lot of fantasy. But that is not the case. You're not having a lot of fantasy, you're actually having a poetic nature. And as such, Taijiquan or poems or paintings, they are realistic descriptions of something that you are experiencing. Even abstract paintings, they're not just abstractions, they are a realistic expression of something that you are experiencing. And it is up to the viewer to get to the same experience that you had at the moment that you did that. What you see with a lot of people, they use abstract paintings as an escape of a description. And that means that their abstraction at that moment becomes something meaningless instead of meaningful. If you look at the paintings of Rothko, for instance, which are very abstract, because the layering of the colors, they create particular kind of moods, and it took a long time every time to create a painting like that. And as a result of that, the painting became elusive, and it became almost a spiritual, maybe really a spiritual expression of reality. Taijiquan also agrees with Tarkovsky in that if you cannot feel the divine, you are not fully mature as a human. So if you have a connection with the divine through the investigation of Tao, then at that moment you are basically a Chandra. At the moment when you cannot feel the divine, then at that moment you're not really a Chandra. You're actually what in the I Ching is called a Shaoran, what you also can call a child. And a Daran in that sense is the same like a Chandra. That is a mature, educated, cultivated person. This is the I Ching studies. Of course, if you have learned the wrong kind of I Ching, it doesn't really matter that much. By the way, you can read about these things in the Zhangsanfeng translation in the Sifu Guide. As such, we can say that art is a sign of the divine at work through you. That means that because you create a bonding with the divine, you are able to create something without it becoming a fantasy. So that means a painter or a poet who only creates something for his own fantasy, that is not a creator. So Tolkien, as a writer, he created a whole imaginary world. I don't know exactly why he did that, but he did it in a particular kind of mystical expression. If you look at the movies of Villeneuve, the movie maker from, for instance, Dune and other famous movies like you know them. You see also that he creates a particular kind of mystical experience in every movie because he has this sense of the divine apparently. You can also make it into a rule instead of rule principles, and then of course it is no longer connected with the divine, but then it is just imagination. In Wudang specifically, Wudang itself means living in a disciplinary form of service. It means that you are dedicating yourself towards discipline in the sense of helping other beings. At the moment when you are not having that kind of life and you're just doing it for the money or the business, and then at that moment you become a little bit of an authoritarian twat, probably, because you are at a certain point taking control of people because you want to make sure that you keep on earning more money. I know several acupuncturists and Tai Chi teachers, masters, who are into it for the money. That's also why they overcharge, why they own several houses or several cars, or maybe even an airplane in some cases. In the heydays of the development of Qigong, there were many Qigong millionaires, and you could clearly see that they were not Daoists, they were materialists. This is a very important theme because doing things for somebody else except for yourself actually elevates you more towards the divine, and that's actually what eventually is going to make you into a spiritual being, a Chandra. So spirituality as such is the recognition that there is no time to lose. Also, that's actually the 11th aspect that I wanted to talk about. There is no time to lose in your spiritual development. You have to practice and to be disciplined because time in life is limited. So you are actually studying time, how to delay time, and how to create more time. And this is also why immortality is such an important part of Taijiquan, and in the poetry of the imagery of Taijiquan, this immortality idea is also a very important aspect. And as a last part, you can see that Tarkovsky sees that people usually are scared of the world. The reason why people are motivated to do things is often out of fear. And the idea that he has is that people should live with and in the world as a partner, so to say. And then in that sense, Taoism says that if you are a spiritual being, you are part of the world and you are intertwined with the world, and you are no longer afraid of things. So insects, lions, tigers, elephants, hogs, anything that might be dangerous to some people, they are no longer a danger for you because you are in communication with them. So that is what elevates the spiritual and the adult person over the child person, and for the spiritual person over the unspiritual person. And that means that normal people, like Lao Tzu says, they don't understand this thing. So as a result that they laugh about it. And that is the difference in Taijiquan as a poetic art, or as an art primarily, and or as a sports or a military discipline, or as a health practice per se. In fact, this brings us to the subject of art in modern society, because modern societies, they are obsessed by categorization of things, economics, modern science, politics. Everybody is trying to categorize everything to try to take control over things, whether it's about quantum physics, or whether it is about astrophysics, or whether it is about economic principles, whether it's about Bitcoin, or whether it's about trading in the stock market, or buying and selling houses. All these kind of things, they are usually, well, how can I say, they are based on the idea that if you control the categories, then everything is fine. You see that in the studies of Chinese medicine, you see it in the studies of Taijiquan, and you see it in the studies of I Ching and Feng Shui and so on, that everybody tries to catch everything in categories, which is something that also happened very extensively in the Han Dynasty. So in that sense, we can see a comparison between the Chinese Middle Ages and modern time, where we can clearly see this obsession. Well, at the moment when we are doing Taijiquan as a art, and we look at art in modern society as a whole, you can see that it's very anti-militarist, and that obsessiveness that people have, that is a militarist attitude. Armies are segmented in particular kind of areas that are easy to control and command, and then Taijiquan as such is an individual activity. So your individual activity has to bring you into that state of divine existence, which is separate from what somebody else at that time might experience. At the moment when you all are going through the same moves, that is going to be excluded from your experience. You can't have a mystical experience and do exactly the same as somebody else. That means that the idea about Chinese culture that people have, that is very communal and group oriented and so on, even though there's tendencies within the militarism of society as a whole to try to be unselfish and to be only focused on the doing of things for the sake of others, Wudang no different. At the same time, to be able to get to that point where you can do that, you have to become an individual. So you have to sacrifice yourself, you have to make that choice because of your conviction as an individual, not because society is bringing that to you. So when we look at things from that perspective, the only thing now as a conclusion that we have to talk about is the work of the ethologist Ellen Dissanayake, because she had some very interesting proposals. She proposed 5 stages of art, and these stages I would like you to comment on in how do you think that they are relating to Taijiquan, and in that sense, of course, the poetic nature of Taijiquan, the art of Taijiquan as such. And she calls these 5 formalization, repetition, exaggeration, elaboration, and the manipulation of expectation. These 5 aspects, these are things that people do at home. When you perform your Taijiquan as an art, you actually, in your learning, you go through these experiences. And how does that work for you in that sense? I would like to know that from you, so please let me see that. What I wanted to point out is that these 5 actually are not that similar from what you can call the scientific method. I want you to think about that too. I like to hear your comments about it. You can also write me individually. It doesn't really matter that much. I'm very much interested in these kinds of things. I will use it for my research, so you will help me a great deal by answering on that question. And in the future then I will make another video where I deal with these comments, if I have enough of these comments, of course. I'm only a small creator, so in that sense I don't have too high expectations, but please surprise me. I look forward to see you back in a new video, and I hope you really enjoy this, so give it a like, make sure you share it with your friends if they are also interested in art, or in Taijiquan as an art, or Qigong as part of art, or meditation as an art, and so on and so forth. If they're not interested in just the healing and the medicine aspect, which is great, no doubt about it, or in the militarist aspect, the nationalist aspect of the way how people very often do this as part of Kung Fu, then at that moment, or part of Wushu, I must say, because Kung Fu is specifically about the individuality of the experience, while Wushu is specifically about the militarization of Taijiquan. So then in that sense, let me know. That's it.